It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you think. You have done a shameful service today for the Christians. You have not defended Christianity today. You should have brought James White with you or someone like that. Seriously, you should have brought someone who could have helped you. You were saying me and Adnan and Ali versus you. Man, you should have brought someone with you. Seriously. What's going on here? 20 years of attacking Islam. 20 years of attacking Islam. 99% of your content is anti-Islam. And all of those things you brought today were dismissed in 4 minutes. You couldn't handle the questioning. I gave you 4. I gave you 4 questions. I did the service, sir, of answering all of your questions. You didn't even answer one of mine. How dare you? How dare you? What is this?
The Quran is an eternal person. While Orthodox Islamic theology insists that the Quran is the uncreated speech of Allah and co-eternal with Allah, that would be interesting enough, we can't forget that according to Muhammad, the Quran is also a person who intercedes for Muslims. In Sahih Muslim, 1874, Muhammad says to his companions, recite the Quran, for it will come on the day of resurrection interceding for its companions. Now, how can a book intercede for people? Muhammad explains in Musnad Ahmed and Sunan Ibn Majah, where he says, the Quran will meet its companion on the day of resurrection when his grave is opened for him in the form of a pale man. The Quran will say to him, do you recognize me? He will say, I do not recognize you. It will say, I am your companion, the Quran, who kept you thirsty on hot days and kept you awake at night. So the Quran, which is eternal and uncreated, appears as a pale man, speaks to Muslims, and then speaks to Allah on their behalf. Again, this person, this pale man, is eternal. Fourth, the Quran isn't just personal, it's multi-personal. And I hear from Muslims that that's impossible. Even though the Quran is an eternal person who appears as a pale man and intercedes for Muslims, there are actually multiple persons within the one nature of the Quran. In Sunan Abu Dawud, 1400, Muhammad said, there is a surah in the Quran which consists of 30 verses. He's referring to Surah Al-Mulk. It will intercede for its companion until he is forgiven. So a specific chapter of the Quran can appear and intercede for those who read it. But Muhammad isn't done. Sahih Muslim, 1874, he tells his followers to recite Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran because these surahs will come as 2 flocks of birds on the day of resurrection, pleading on behalf of the Muslims who recited them. Since Muhammad mentions 3 different surahs of the Quran, which have their own distinct personalities, their own knowledge, I think we can say that all of the surahs of the Quran have their own distinct personalities. The Quran Muslims read today is thus one in essence as the word of Allah, but 114 in person. The personal chapters come as flocks of birds pleading on behalf of Muslims. I see lots of Muslims smiling and laughing at this. This is what your prophet said. This is your prophet. I think it's funny too, but I try to hide that a little bit.
He says that, this is exactly his words. He said the Quran is an eternal person. Tell me one scholar in the history of Islam who said that. This is a lie. He says the Quran is, it will come as a shafi'ah on the day of judgment. So if this is the question, I'll put it better for you, I'll help you, yeah? If the Quran is an attribute of God, how can it intercede for you? This is what he's saying, right? It's a good question. This is a good question. But it's not a proper understanding of the hadith. This is the only good question you had. I'll give it to you. This is the only good question you had. The hadith says, Iqra al-Quran. So it's not that the Quran, i.e. the attribute of Allah that will intercede for you on the day of judgment, but it is your qira'ah of the Quran and the thawab that you get of the Quran, which means the reward you get from the recitation of the Quran, not the Quran as an attribute of Allah. Yeah. He says, therefore, there's 114 persons of the Quran. Two co-quay fallacy. I told you he would do it and appeal to hypocrisy. So here are you admitting that having more than one person of a being of God is wrong because you should leave Trinitarianism then? But obviously, as we know, there's no one in the history of Islam that referred to the surah of the Quran as persons. This is wrong. You don't know about Islam. Here you're being educated. He says person. I'm going to try and do this in 3 minutes, yeah? He says person. This shows you that the surah are he thinks. He says he thinks this means that the chapters of the Quran are persons. I've always wanted to do this, yeah? To take a word from Dwayne, the Rock Johnson. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you think. I mean, flock of birds and the man who comes, the pale man. Yes, this is in good deeds. And this proves my point, once again, that the qira'ah of the Quran is what is represented, the thawab. You get the rewards for doing the good. And it comes. That's what the hadith is talking about. The man comes in a good form. This is the hadith in Bukhari.
If Allah knows what the Christian doctrine is, why doesn't Allah say what the Christian doctrine is and then explain why it's wrong? He just never does. Allah tries to refute the Trinity, doesn't know what the doctrine of the Trinity is. He thinks it's Allah, Jesus, and Mary, who are three separate beings who just work together. That's not the doctrine of the Trinity. What's he responding to? Likewise, with the sonship of Jesus, he gets it all wrong. So you've got a problem here. Either your God doesn't know what we believe, in which case he lacks knowledge, or he does know what we believe and he's deliberately making fun of it or misrepresenting it. If he's deliberately misrepresenting it, then that would be an ethical problem.
You don't know these things. He says the Quran gets the Trinity wrong. And he's talking about chapter 5, verse 116 of the Quran, where it talks about, did you tell your mother that you can take two of us as lords beside God? It's not talking about the Trinity in this verse. Where does it say this is the Trinity and then describe it? The verses that describe the Trinity, for example, chapter 4, verse 171 of the Quran, other places of the Quran, like chapter 5 where the brother was reading, it never tells you what the Trinity is, which is why, for example, many scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah and his Jawab al-Sahih, many scholars actually did say that the Trinity was the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But some scholars differed with them in exegesis. It doesn't matter. The word three in Arabic, thalatha, means all of the kinds of Trinities that all of the Christians have ever believed in all of history. So the word thalatha in Arabic is all comprehensive. It doesn't say that the word Trinity is Mary. It doesn't say that in the Quran. You have lied against the Quran.
Christians claim that Jesus is the Son of God. The Quran responds in Surah 6, verse 101. How can Allah have a son when he has no wife? Notice that the Quran assumes that filial terms referring to offspring, have to be interpreted in a biological sense. Well, if we can only understand these terms biologically, we have to ask about the Quran's mother. Surah 13, verse 39. Allah blots out what he wills and confirms what he wills, and with him is the mother of the book, al-Kitab. The Quran's mother is in the presence of Allah. I would normally be happy with some metaphorical meaning of something like that, but it's the Quran itself which says that we have to interpret claims about Jesus being the Son of God biologically. So, if we have to interpret these claims biologically, then I have to say, if the Quran has a mommy, who's the daddy?
He said, وَلَمْ تَكُنْ لَهُ صَاحِبًا. He didn't know the Arabic, but I'm going to give him the Arabic. In chapter 6, verse 108 of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah did not have a mate. So does this mean, what does this mean? That biological, they had a discussion about biological. Really and truly, how can you have a begotten son? There's only three options. Number one, biology. Number two, adoption. And number three, metaphor. And if you say it's not biology and it's not adoption, it must be a metaphor. So Jesus is not a son of God. He says means mother. It doesn't only mean mother. Don't tell me about Arabic language. You ask me about Arabic language in this forum. You ask me, you don't tell me. You ask, Muhammad, what does the word mean? You don't tell me means this. No, I tell you, it means mother, yes. It doesn't only mean mother. We say Ummahat al-Kutub, the main books. It means something foundational. Qura. The Quran says the main cities. Come on, man. Don't waste my time with this.
Allah's Spirit, who is eternal and the co-creator of life, is a person. According to Islamic theology, nothing that is a part of Allah or that originates from within Allah is created. But the Quran says that Allah breathes out His Spirit. This means that, like Allah's eternal speech, the Spirit comes from within Allah and is thus uncreated and eternal.
Spirit of God hovered over after God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, no problem. If that's meant to be God, no problem. Let's go to Zechariah's in Old Testament, chapter 6, verse 5. There are 4 spirits. So are there 7 gods now? Because the word in Hebrew is ruach. And you wouldn't know about Hebrew because look, I think not only do you not know Arabic, but you don't know Hebrew, and you're making a big mistake by trying to interpret the biblical text in this way. There's 2 words for spirits in the Hebrew language, ruh, which is the same as the Arabic, and the ruach. The word ruach is here in Zechariah chapter 6, verse 5, talking about 4 spirits. So tell us why, if that is a spirit and it's God, then how comes there's only 3 gods, 3 persons of God, and there isn't 7, for example? What's going on here? 20 years of attacking Islam. 20 years of attacking Islam. 99% of your content is anti-Islam. And all of those things you brought today were dismissed in minutes. You couldn't handle the questioning. I gave you 4. I gave you 4 questions. I did the service, sir, of answering all of your questions. You didn't even answer one of mine. How dare you? How dare you? You have done a shameful service today for the Christians. You have not defended Christianity today. You should have brought James White with you or someone like that. Seriously, you should have brought someone who could have helped you. You were saying me and Adnan and Ali versus you. Man, you should have brought someone with you. Seriously. What's going on here? You couldn't handle the questioning. I gave you 4. I gave you 4 questions. I did the service, sir, of answering all of your questions. You didn't even answer one of mine. How dare you? How dare you? What is this?